Thank you for joining us and trickling in. We have some exciting speaker today, and excited about the project and the product that is going to be discussed, something that is obviously in the lives of us because that's the way today's society is headed, right? In this whole digital space and digital skills and digital world. But we'll give a few more minutes to maybe get a few more of you trickling in, and then we'll get right to our speaker.
Can I just say something real quick? Hi, everybody.
Hi, Norma. How are you? Good to see you.
Good. Listen, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to miss this meeting, but I have to drive up to court to support somebody. So I'm actually in my car, so I'm just going to really be listening because I didn't want to miss it, okay?
Absolutely. No problem. No worries. And be safe, focus. So if you want to be off camera, that's fine. Because again, safety is our priority. That's what we were talking about, health and safety, and sometimes how we have to make these accommodations or changes in our lives and lifestyles to ensure our safety first. All right, well, we're going to get started. And today I'm excited to introduce somebody that's been working in parallel form with our online higher education programming in P2P. And so I want to make sure that we have enough time frame so that she can really indulge us with the product that she's bringing. And Dr. Stephanie Fleming is the program coordinator at From Prison Cells to PhD, that's P2P, and that's our fiscal sponsor and parent company, where she helps lead systemic change and expand equitable access to higher education within the Unlock Higher Education Coalition. Grounded in social psychology, her professional perspective is shaped by over 28 years of experience across human services and justice adjacent systems. Earlier in her career, she built her bear with me for a minute there. Help me out, Dr. Fleming.
What's this say? What's this say? Spell it out to me. What's that say?
Pedagogical.
Pedagogical.
Yes. Okay. Word I don't use often, so bear with me, guys. And Research Foundation as a college instructor teaching at Florida State University and St. Leo University, and practice as a licensed mental health therapist. This is where we align. And so, it's a tough field, and she's done some wonderful work in that space. Bridging the gap between traditional educational structures and the digital future, Dr. Fleming is also the founder and principal of Justice Beacon Solutions, which is what she's going to bring to our table today. So excited about it. She created Justice Decision Observability, JDO, a governance discipline that documents exactly how human authority and judgment interact with automated AI system outputs. Guys, this is real world justice. This is real world environment. We have no choice but to embrace AI today. By focusing on the crucial execution layer where AI signals meet human decisions, Dr. Fleming's work ensures institutional decision-making remains transparent, observable, and defensible to us all. Dr. Fleming, and my apologies for killing that word.
No, that's fine.
It's a very expanded, concept that you're bringing to us, and I can't wait to learn more.
Thank you so much, Judith. Thank you guys for having me on today. I appreciate the opportunity to be here because the work that you guys do, with Unlock Higher Ed, you're doing incredibly important things. Organizations like yours, they remind us that, education, simply isn't about earning a degree. It's about creating opportunity, really restoring a lot of hope and helping people to kind of build, beyond their past. So again, thank you for having me this afternoon. So I am Stephanie Fleming, the founder and principal of Justice Beacon Solutions. I do hold that PhD in social psychology, and I have a master's degree in psychology. And I have spent it was almost 3 decades since I was 19. I was just telling them I'm almost 49. I'll be 49 in September. So within that time, within the small amount that I was away, from incarceration, I've spent nearly, 3 decades working in, originally started to call it what mental health. I worked in detox and those type of things, but it's really just human services. My career really started in mental health and co-occurring disorders. And gradually what it did was it really kind of expanded into corrections. I was in hospitals, higher education in itself, research, academia, all organizational kind of leadership. Throughout that whole journey, even serving as a research psychologist, licensed therapist and all that, that was one thing, but the thing that kept tying it back together was that I kept working for the justice system, and even at one point I worked for the BOP themselves. I worked out at the USP in Pollock, Louisiana. I worked in the psychology department there. At one time it was called the Challenge Program. That was in the early 2000s. That was a whole age and a decade ago, but at the same time, it's really kind of relevant still of, what is going on today. So today as well, as Judith mentioned too, I also have the privilege of serving as the program coordinator over at P2P, Prison Cells to Professionals, founded, of course, by Dr. Stanley Andrees. I completed the P2P program myself back in 2021, and still every day have the opportunity right now to really kind of help justice impacted students, but also more so with their families at this point, to really look at that higher education, build that professional network with them, and really create opportunities that they may have never really imagined possible for them because of what they've been through. And one thing I always tell people is that even looking at the resume, you look at my resume, for example, it could be 4 or 5, whatever it is, 7 pages long. It's not saying anything about my whole story, right? I mean, it basically just tells you where someone's worked. It doesn't tell you, what was actually lived through for anyone, and I always kind of iterate that to the students in the cohort as we go through and, talk about these kind of things. I've experienced the system from multiple perspectives, not only as a psychologist, as educator, researcher, therapist, however you want to look at it, but also as someone who became justice impacted through incarceration. Those experiences, both before, during, and after, really, changed how I see operational systems, how I looked at leadership, how I looked at opportunities in themselves, accountability, and really the human decision making. When I look back, every single chapter in my life, prepared me for where I am working today. Before incarceration, I understood decision making, academically and clinically. That's what we did every day. I studied it. I taught it to other students. I worked inside institutions where difficult decisions, had to be made every single day. Then I experienced, the same thing, those same systems from the other side. What really kind of stuck with me, or what struck me, was that people weren't intentionally making bad decisions. I'm talking about staff, okay? It was, really how little anyone could actually see how those decisions were actually being made. It's like the policies existed. They were always there. It wasn't that they were bad either. And the outcomes were always documented. And it wasn't that the outcomes were always bad, but it was like everything in between, all of that middle part between the time that an alert goes off and it ends, is all that human behavior that was never actually documented or put down on paper. Okay. The information that someone had, those pressures that they were under at the time, completing the priorities that they faced, the authority they exercised, all of that stuff was all invisible. Okay. Once you've kind of experienced that, or what I've seen, once you kind of experience that on both sides, okay, it's impossible not to recognize that gap. Even after returning home, I realized the same visibility gap existed. It was almost like too often lived experience was overlooked, instead of recognized as expertise. That really kind of sat with me for a while, and it made me believe, or try to, look at that reinforcement of these organizations. And I said, well, they really need a better way to understand the human side of decision making. It just wasn't there. And that was part of the realization that eventually, became that foundation for Justice Beacon Solutions, or JBS. Okay. What we do at JBS, what it is, it's an AI governance, or you want to look at it as a human decision governance company. We help organizations really kind of understand what happens after the technology, provides information once the alert. These organizations, they come up with these wonderful systems and the software, and they go ahead and they sell it, and it goes out and it's deployed and they're being used. It usually does what it's supposed to, right? But when the human actually gets involved in it, that's when decisions actually have to be made. And that's where a lot of times there's a breakdown, there's a miscommunication that happens. So our work really kind of sits at the intersection of people, technology, and the governance, because even in this AI-enabled world, people still remain responsible for those decisions that shape lives every day. So as artificial intelligence, as that becomes part of decisions and affects people, affects organizations, the organizations or the institutions in themselves, they have a sense of responsibility to ensure that those technologies are being used ethically, that they are transparent, that there's responsibility behind it in the ways that, people can trust. And that's what AI governance really is. It's the policies, it's oversight, and it's accountability that helps organizations use AI responsibly. Now, through my own experiences, I realized something else that was important in this whole thing is that term governance in itself doesn't stop with the technology. It actually begins with people. So if you go on LinkedIn every day, you're going to see this word AI governance pop up. 98.8% of the time, they are talking about the software part of the AI. So they're what we consider to be upstream, where the technology is being produced. Our AI governance with JBS, we're like the small amount, the 2% that's downstream after that software has actually been created, deployed, and is being used. So two different scenarios between it. But a lot of times you're going to see, you hear that word governance, you're going to see AI, and those things are being meshed together. And that makes it difficult too, because a lot of people, they think it's the same thing, and they are. They're completely two different scenarios. But every AI system still depends, again, remember, on that human being, the interpret the information that is provided. So, that human has to apply professional judgment and ultimately decides what's going to happen next. Technology may provide the information and technology may provide recommendations, but people are the ones that still are going to remain responsible for those ultimate decisions that are made. That's where our work begins. So at JBS, when we say that we focus on what happens after the AI, produces an output, we start to ask questions such as, how did someone interpret that recommendation? Did they agree on it? Did they override that system when the alert came in? What other information, influenced that decision at the time? Think about the environment that they're in. Maybe they have 30 alarms going off at one time on their dashboard, and they're only focusing on one. What organizational pressures existed at that particular moment that alert went off? And the last question, not necessarily last, but questions that we ask will be something like, how did they ultimately arrive at their final decision? Those questions matter because technology doesn't make the decisions. Remember, the people do. If we want AI to improve outcomes, instead of simply just automating, existing problems, we have to understand how people interact with these systems. Okay. So my co-founder, she's the director of operations and co-author of the majority of the work that we do is Jana Broads. Okay. And a lot of you know Jana through P2P. She's mentor now with P2P, pops in here and there. I was hoping she was going to be able to be here today as well. But in the beginning, her and I started looking at this kind of work and realized that there was something really important about it. There wasn't an established discipline or even governance, discipline focused at this time, specifically on documenting and understanding what happens after the AI enters, like say for example, corrections and the decision-making process within the whole justice system, okay? Most governance framework that you look up today focuses specifically just on, again, that upstream, that technology in itself, how the AI was designed, how it was validated, how it was deployed, how it was monitored, how it was regulated. Accountability, though, doesn't end with the technology. It ultimately rests with people. So you hear that term human in the loop, that's where we're at. That's where we sit right now with JBS. Now, I mentioned Jana because actually, Jana's history of incarceration and her experience with community supervision really became like a significant influence in shaping the majority of this work. Through her own lived experience, she witnessed a lot firsthand. The consequences of decisions that lacked a lot of transparency and accountability. At the same time, my background with the psychology gave me another perspective. I understood how people think, how they looked at stress, or in these environments that they were working in, and ultimately how like they were able to shape or their decisions were being made. So when we brought those two perspectives together, we realized that we were really kind of asking the same question from two different directions. The question really, is how do we understand and document human decisions that are shaped, that ultimately shape people's lives? Okay. We recognize that the accountability and justice, requires more than policies. It requires more than compliance checks, and it requires more than just the technology that's out there. What it really kind of requires is understanding that human decision layer in itself. So we actually went and we carved in a whole new category, which we call Justice Decision Observability, or JDO, okay, which actually addresses that gap in that human decision layer in itself. Reason that we created this is because that we believe that accountability and justice really kind of requires that visibility into the human decision, not just with that technology. So JDO in itself provides, organizations with a structured way to really kind of observe, document, and reconstruct, and really kind of learn from, that human decision making that's being made in those environments. It makes the decision, or it makes the ultimate. Remember I said that we have an alert that goes off and we have the ending, and those are usually the only two that are documented. JDO is all that middle stuff that's going on between the time the alert happens and the time it ends. So, what is that person actually doing, or what are they looking at with the dashboard? I'm going to show you in just a minute. We're going to apply it to all different scenarios, not just in the correctional institution. But since creating JDO, Jana and I, we continue to really kind of build this field. We created a whole architecture for it, through a whole publication. I think we have like 37 published standards works now with it. There's practical frameworks to it. There's methodology to it. We were able to take this concept and actually prove we could make it work through something called the moment of authority. Okay. And that's a hard thing as well, because there are people that come almost every day and they're asking questions, even on LinkedIn, and they reach out and say, well, how I don't understand. How can you take a theory and say it's true? And I said, well, here, I'm going to show you how we can take a theory and actually show you that we can execute it and come up with end results to it. Okay. So with JDO, knowing that was built, with that combination between professional expertise and lived experiences, our different perspectives really kind of strengthen one another. And together, they became foundation. Okay. Of that discipline.
He got belly rub this morning.
Oh, that's May. I'm glad May's here. Glad to see you, May. Okay.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Fleming. I didn't realize I wasn't muted.
You're fine. So it goes. So what do you say? What do we do? What is Justice Beacon or JBS? What do we actually do? Okay. The easiest way to explain it, think about a real world example. Okay. Let's and like I said, I'm gonna pull it out of the justice. We'll look at it this way. Okay. Imagine that a college, for example, receives an application from someone who's informally incarcerated. And the admission office uses an AI-assisted application review system, which they do. And we know that helps prioritize the applications. The system recommends additional review for that particular student because they've been impacted. An advisor or admissions counselor, they open the application up. At that point, the technology's job is done. So we know that it did what it was supposed to. Okay. Everything that happens next, belongs to a person. So the counselor begins reading the application. They notice that the applicant, earned college credits while they were incarcerated, for example. They completed treatment and a rehabilitation program. Maybe they maintained employment after release, all those kind of things. They have a strong, letters of recommendation, because I know we do them every day for P2P for our scholars. And what the students actually showed is that they demonstrate a lot of resilience and, personal growth. The counselor also knows that there's only a limited number of seats available, okay, in the university or in the course that that person may want to take, for example. We know that scholarships are limited quite a bit. Hundreds of applications still need to be reviewed before the deadline. So eventually they make a decision. Most institutions document that final decision. Some document the AI recommendation. They don't even look at the other stuff. They just look at what the AI says and go ahead and put that in. Very few of them actually document how the human, being reacted to it. So like to say, for example, why did they agree with the recommendation? Why did they override it? What other information influenced the decision that they finally made for that formerly incarcerated student? Or, what organizational pressures existed at that moment? Maybe they wanted to go to lunch. They just wanted to get it done. So they went ahead and just took what the system told them, and that was the end of it. Okay. How much weight did they give the AI recommendation versus their own professional judgment? That's another question that has to come in. Okay. That's where Justice Beacon Solutions would actually fit into this whole scenario. We help organizations like that understand that human decision process, not to second guess professionals or assign blame, anything like that. We're not doing that, but we want to help them learn. We want to help them learn where decisions are made consistently, where professionals give the information that they needed, maybe where patterns show up for certain policies that weren't working as intended. Could additional training improve outcomes? Could the organization better support people making those decisions? The admission counselor benefits because their professional judgment is better understood and supported. Okay, if we were able to go through and do scenarios such as this, the institution benefits because its decision making becomes more transparent or more explainable and actually more defensible long term. Most importantly, though, is that the applicant benefits because the decision that's being made with a system that's continually learning and improving and striving to be as fair or as thoughtful as possible. Okay, so we can take those exact same principles and just apply them directly to corrections. Imagine that a correction officer receives an alert from an AI system, a monitoring system, for example. Someone's at high risk, and that could be an ankle monitor, that could be supervision. Like I said, it could be inside the institution, it could be someone on pretrial, any form that we look at with public safety, whatnot. The officer knows something the technology doesn't. Okay, maybe they've spoken with that individual that morning. Okay, or maybe that they know that there's been a recent family tragedy or something with that person. Of course, the AI system wouldn't know that, but the person does. Maybe they recognize the behavior, that suggests emotional distress rather than aggression. So the system might be saying that this person's being aggressive, but that's not what it is. I mean, like I said, they're dealing with a tragedy or they're dealing with the death in the family. Okay. The officer at that point really can exercise professional judgment and respond differently than the technology suggested. Okay. Months later, for example, if someone asks why that decision was made, most organizations can show the alert. They record that the technology records the alert that comes in. They can show the outcome, but what are they missing again? They can't explain the human reasoning between the two. That middle part, again, that gap. So that missing layer is exactly, what we do to help these organizations try to understand it. We're not here, JBS isn't here. We don't want to evaluate the technology. We don't want to say if it was actually right or wrong. We're not trying to replace human judgment. We're not trying to point fingers at the staff or the facility in itself. We just want to help the organization really kind of understand how people use that information to make these important decisions. For example, in this one, this was a real life scenario. Okay, and that person was like 2 steps to being violated, where it was going to send them back into the institution because the system said that they were being aggressive and they were violating. They were violated because of that, and it had nothing to do with that. So, we want to have these individuals or even the staff members come through and really kind of learn how their behavior is influential as well. People can also ask, who is this work for? What are we doing it for? our clients, majority of them include, correctional facilities, the agencies in themselves, community and correctional organizations, working with probation, parole departments, courts, colleges, universities, like say anything with public safety. We work with technology companies as well, especially those that, like I said, that create the ankle monitoring or the body cams, the voice recorders for the police. Anything within that justice system. There's researchers that we have out there as well, and of course organizations working to improve human decision making also. Okay. Now, while all those organizations may be our clients, they aren't the only people who benefit. We know that correctional officers benefit from it, probation officers, case managers, counselors, judges, administrative professionals, faculty benefit from it, like an example we talked about. Anyone who's really responsible for making important decisions deserves, the ability to understand, explain, and improve how those decisions get made. Justice impacted individuals benefit from it. So instead of them laying on the floor, hyperventilating for 3 hours, the system, is going to say something to them like, I don't know, the breathing, or the person has irregular breathing going on. We could go back and actually reconstruct and figure out what was going on with that person who was supposed to make the decision at that time to go check on that person or do a check on them. Why did it take them 2.5 hours to get there? Or why was that system overridden? So we do reconstruction backwards. We have front facing and we have back facing the way that we do it. But any of those things, students seeking second chance, family benefit, all these things. Ultimately, everyone benefits when decisions become more transparent, because at that point they become more accountable and more understandable. Okay. So when organizations in themselves really understand how those decisions are being made, they can identify what processes are working and which ones are working well. Like I said, most of the time, it's not that their policies are bad. It's that, Officer A understood the policy completely, where Officer B had a different interpretation of it. So of course their choice or their decision is going to be completely different. So it wasn't the policy that was the problem, it was the human. It was the human and how they interpreted it. There might be additional training that may be needed for some, but that's not, our field. That's not where we leave it. We leave it up to, the facility to decide what they're going to do with that. There might be places, where the policies don't reflect operational reality, which is almost all the time, where people need more support, especially, like I said, we're talking about a high-paced environment. We have people that come in. We have a gentleman that just actually said this morning that he walked in at 7:30 and he had 37 alerts about ankle monitors going off on his. He didn't even know where to start this morning, and were they all what they were assumed to be? Likelihood was not. They weren't. But then again, you have to go through every single one. So that's why we exist. So that's why JBS exists. Again, not to replace people or anything like that. We just want to make people make better decisions and strengthen that accountability. Okay. So, the other thing that I wanted to talk about with you guys today too, or, one of the reasons that I was excited, when you said, okay, you want to come talk for Unlock Higher Ed, was because this work really connects, naturally with higher education. Every educational opportunity we know still, like in that scenario, it begins with the decision, the admissions, financial, scholarship, placement, support services, increasing technology, all of that may help it, inform those decisions. But at the end of the day, as we see, right, the person still decides. I mean, can we understand why those decisions are actually being made? Can we actually explain it? Can we learn from it? How do we go about to improve it? Those questions matter just as much in higher education as they would do in correction. One of the things I love about this work is that it reminds us every day that, people and, people themselves, like I said, they may make the worst decisions that they've ever made. And it might not be just because of the fact, like I said, that they're trying to be negative about it. It might be the fact that they're just completely overwhelmed by their environment, or they just don't know what they're doing, So asking all those questions, education in itself, personally, education changed my own life. I mean, I didn't, it didn't simply give me degrees or, what it really did and the way I look at it. It gave me it gave me language, and it gave me a lot of research skills and a lot of confidence. And it taught me how to ask better questions. And when I went through my own experience through the incarceration, there was a period of time even when I came home, and I didn't even want to tell anyone what my education was, because I just felt like it was all gone at that point because of being stripped going through that system, but as I sat and, continued to rebuild going through P2P, for example, what it really kind of showed me is that it allowed me to kind of transform my own lived experience into, scholarship and, practical work that I hope, improve systems for other people. Looking back, I don't think I fully appreciated how important education would become in my own life. And I know that now, thinking about it. It became, this bridge between, who I had been and who I wanted to be. Because even before my own incarceration or that whole legal experience, I remember having questions then. I was like, is this really what I want to do? And those should have been signals at that time that there was other things that I was probably, I don't want to say destined to be at, but there was other areas that I would have never had the opportunity to experience without having to go through all that negative stuff to get to the other side of it, So I guess it really kind of reminded me that, part of the story wasn't over, that there were still other things out there that needed to be explored, P2P, became that huge, like I said, a huge part of that journey for me. Like many people leaving incarceration, I was rebuilding or didn't really know how to rebuild professionally while trying to kind of rediscover where I fit, didn't know where I was going to be at. P2P, did give me a lot of educational opportunities, but it was more so that community that it provided. It was being able to do that mentorship or having the accountability, really kind of building those professional relationships and networking. And probably the most important, it really kind of surrounded me with people who genuinely believed, that our past shouldn't define who we would be future-wise, moving forward. So even like I said, I completed the P2P program in 2021, and I mentored briefly before I ended up going away, and then came home. And even right now, serving as the program coordinator gives me the privilege every day, like I said, of helping create those same opportunities for other students or other scholars that are coming through. Every student that I work with reminds me why this work matters. I watch people, who once believed, even my partner, Jana brought. I watched people who believed college wasn't possible, okay, or that the degrees and things, along those lines, that just wasn't something for them. What I said, I sit and I watch people build careers that they never thought that they have. I watch them, it really kind of replace that hopelessness with a lot of confidence. And that's what education does. It doesn't just change our careers. It changes our identities. It changes our families, our communities, generations. When I think about everything that I've experienced personally, I keep coming back to like one simple idea. And I say that most people, they're trying to do the right thing. Most professionals, they're making, these incredibly difficult decisions under enormous pressure in their environments. Most justice impacted people, they simply want an opportunity to demonstrate, who they are today, not to be permanently judged about who they were yesterday, And sometimes the challenge is the people, sometimes it's the system in itself. So if we can't understand, how those decisions are being made, we can't help improve them. So that visibility in itself creates the learning. The learning in itself creates better systems. And of course, the better systems create the better outcomes for us. Better outcomes, more opportunities for people to succeed, and that's ultimately why, Justice Beacon Solutions, what we're trying to contribute by that side. So, if I can leave the audience with a couple of thoughts, for today, just thinking about this, it would be this, I tell people, and I say it every day, whether or not it's through JBS or whether or not it's through, P2P, don't allow any circumstance that you have today to really become your identity for tomorrow, because we know how quickly that's taken and it gets swept, in that direction. We know that the current situation we live in now, this isn't going to be the end result. There's going to be there's another chapter to it. So you have to be able to keep learning, read everything that you can, make the decisions on your own, ask questions, seek those mentors, build those relationships, and really take educational opportunity that's available. We know through P2P, we offer a lot of free college courses and credits and whatnot. Take advantage of those things. I mean, that's why they're there. Education changes, far more than than careers. Changes how you see yourself. I mean, it changes how the world sees you, possibilities, And I think, for example, I say that I'm living proof of that to a point. I would have never thought in all this time, since I grew up the way that I did, which, education in itself, that wasn't thought of. It was more so go to work. You got to go to work. You go to work, or I end up going to school. You wasting your time. I finished school. Why are you going for another degree? You already have one. You don't have a job for that one yet. It's the same kind of thing. But it was building up, and then having it taken from me. But then I have to realize later on that they can only take a license from me. They can't take my education away from me. They can't take my experience away from me. So they have to go and build in another direction. But even 2 years ago, maybe because it's been about maybe just a little bit over 2 years that, Jan and myself, we started with this Justice Beacon or started to work on it. Even before that, I wouldn't have thought about owning another company or going through that process because I thought I was licked. I thought I was done at that point, but I am, and I want to say that I am incredibly grateful for organizations, especially with Unlock Higher Ed, because every day, you're helping open the doors, that many people, assume were permanently closed. I mean, that's just part of it. I'm grateful for P2P and, Dr. Andreessen and the rest of the group as well for his leadership, because of the vision with P2P and really that belief that education is one of the most powerful forms of justice reform. And, like I said, I'm grateful for, people such as Jana, Marianne Gibson, a lot of other Nikki is on here, Judith, a lot of other individuals that really, I give this concept of this idea and continue to believe in it and continue to say, keep pushing forward, keep going with it. So, I know that none of that arrives where we're at alone. Okay. So I appreciate everyone. And I just want to, just kind of open the door up if there's any questions or comments, and certainly here to answer them for you. So thank you so much, guys.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Fleming. And again, I get excited about this. I do have several questions, but I'll reserve mine to the last, and I'll open it out to the floor if you want to propose those questions to Dr. Fleming regarding her product.
Some of it's still kind of a hard concept because it's still a hard concept to even try to sell to the DOCs and whatnot, because this is governance in itself is something new. It's a new field. The other thing is that we have a lot of those, especially like I said, a lot of those DOCs that are not ready to accept the change yet that's coming. That's part of the other issue. And it's hard sometimes to kind of wrap around and say exactly, because you say, because people are still probably saying, what exactly do you do? We're documenting human decisions. That's what we're doing to give that sense of the accountability. That's the easiest way to explain it. That's the easiest way.
So I have a question, and it relates to algorithm. You know how like all of the AIs or all of the information that we are kind of like gather today, it pretty much is related to, what's out there being used the most, what are the algorithms pushing forward and all of that stuff. And so even when I've used several AI tools at the same time, I get different answers. They're not all consistent. So my question is, being that we're putting in that human factor into this, kind of like a quality assurance per se, that human factor into what the AI is pushing out there, is this being more evident as to how algorithms do affect those results, or is it highlighting any of those tactics that are subliminally being very leading in our way?
We want to go back, and as I said, if we originally go back to that framework that we put together, there's a term, it's called the moment of authority. And right at that term, that would be the exact moment that we say a signal comes in on a dashboard, and I say signal could be anything, right? A signal can be someone tampering with one of the doors, or they're trying to, I don't know, they're trying to get out into the yard or anything like that, right? Okay, and the moment of authority should be the exact moment that this person has the idea, they see the signal on their dashboard, and they make a decision, they click it, or they ignore it, or they override it, or whatnot. The problem with that, though, is that, you know, we're not mind readers. I mean, we're never going to fully know what that person was actually trying, you know, thinking about at the time that they made the actual choice. But we could get pretty close to it. We could get pretty close to it. So it's like those algorithms, they come out, and for the most part, Judith, most of them are almost like, they're almost on point 100%. You know, is there ever false alerts that come out? It's not that it's a false alert that's actually being shown. The alert is usually pretty accurate. The reason behind it, though, is the problem. That's what we're trying to get to, is to figure out what actually caused, you know, this person to make a decision. It says, for example, in the one about the person that was where the monitor saying that they're being aggressive. So, well, how can a monitor? First of all, that monitor is actually, like I said, looking at their heart rate, it's looking at their breathing, and the way that software was designed was to come in and say, if you breathe a certain way or your heart rate's a certain way, that equals aggression. Well, we know that that wasn't aggression. We know that that person had a death in their family. They were grieving is what was going on. But it would have been very simple for if that person, for example, if that community that supervisor, if he just went in and decided, oh, they're being aggressive, and just clicked it and violated them.
And that's such an important aspect of it that obviously AI will not be able to, you know, tell, because the environmental factors are so affect us so directly and affect our decision making so directly. So I'm glad that there's something that we're able to take that into consideration and still have a human component. Yeah.
That's exactly, that's where we pick up. As soon as that AI system, and as soon as that AI stops right there, where the human has to take over, that's what we want to do, is we want to take that category and show, or, you know, put the documentation together and say, well, this is the likelihood of what happens. Now, like I said, are we always going to be 100%? No, we're never going to be 100% accurate. And even in some of these facilities, we know that they operate on very old equipment. They might not even have AI. But even the ones that do have AI, if it, for example, if it's case management, some of the case management notes are like two words long. That's not telling us anything of what happened between a signal and the end. Checked on inmate, period. What does that tell us? That tells us nothing. You know, so again, it's like the more we could go in and actually, you know, give the documentation, say, well, let's go back and let's reconstruct actually what happened, you know, in that space. Gives that sense, not necessarily just helping the staff out, not necessarily just helping out the facility, but also that person. I mean, also that incarcerated person. Yeah. I see that question too. It said, okay, so you talk a lot about the execution layer, you know, where the AI systems meet human judgment. What is the most surprising thing that you observe when human authority interacts with those outputs? Okay. So this is one, you know, think about this, or think about I'm gonna think about how to frame it. The most surprising thing about what's observed, it's what the JDO was fundamentally kind of built to document. That isn't, you know, of course, that human override. You know, AI in itself is, we don't know, you know, what they actually did. So think about a decision maker, you know, receives an automated risk score, for example, a recommendation or a flag alert, something like that. Okay. They make the call, they document it. But when you get back the reconstruction of the decision event, what the signal, you know, captured, or what was going in, that is really, you know, that's what we want to look at. It's like the state of, you know, how close, it was kind of how I answered Judah too, how close can we get to the actual decision, why they did what they did? Okay, we said, well, do we go in and we do the interviews? We do a whole like variety of different ways to get that interpretation, but that gap is, you know, that decision visibility gap. And, you know, surprisingly, that thing is, you know, how the institutions, how they continue to have this whole space that remains invisible, is because they just don't have any kind of governance or anyone who's in there who's actually capturing that part of that moment of authority. So that's where that portion comes in. It gets in real deep. We could keep going into that detail on that. There's a lot to it too.
Yeah. Let's see. May has had her hand up for a minute.
Hey, May, how are you?
Hi, Professor. I wondered if, I'm sorry about Lily. She came in and wanted attention. I wondered if, are you talking about something that could help, say, for example, the Getting Out app, where you use to message with people that are incarcerated. And back in February, I sent this cute, because, I live in Montana, so everything's cowboyish. And it was this cute little, like, 50s retro Valentine, the old fashioned ones. And it was a picture of a little cowgirl, and she had a cowboy hat, and she had on a gun holster. And they were, okay, it's not gang sign. It's a Valentine's from the 50s, very Montanish, and they rejected it. And I never did do anything about it. I was like idiots, but that probably was AI rejected. I'm thinking.
More, what was it going to, May? Was it going to a federal facility? Or
yeah, it was going to an offender. It was going to an offender just as a picture of Happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
And they rejected it. And I'm like, anybody who would have looked at that content would have seen it's very Western. There's nothing or nefarious about it. So would that have been what, this would have been the intervention then between that?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, because that could kind of even run along the same lines as someone who was trying to file a grievance. Because
yes,
there's a person that has to come in. I mean, so that could have been something. Did the AI pick it up? They could have. I mean, it could have been the AI. It could have been the person that looked at it, and like I said, they interpreted it completely different than the person sitting behind them. So I mean, either way, but that's exactly still along those same lines, May, because it's still that sense of the accountability. So I mean, could we have gone in and asked that person or figured out why they did it? Yes, and that's. Like I said, even when it comes to these grievances or those kind of policies that are set up, so the more data we could get from it, we could really kind of understand where maybe some of those flaws are coming in or why certain signals are being activated when they don't need necessarily to be activated.
And and I know a lot of facilities use the Getting Out app. I've had some messages that that would sit there forever waiting to be approved. And then some that were just like instantaneous. And and that process that they use, it says that sometimes messages have to be reviewed, etc. Okay, we get that part, but they don't tell you what the process is. And sometimes you sit there with messages for just days, it seems.
Yeah.
And what, that, and somehow we need to move that process along. And then would this be something like here in Montana, we have off the charts incarceration rates right now, and it's got to do with a lot of things to where they're putting people into the dreaded core civic, and they've got 1,000 guys in Mississippi right now. So a lot of movement is coming in. We're going into legislative session because we're every 2 years in January. A lot of movement to go, what else can we do to reduce the burden? So would let's just say we put people on move more people to house arrest, and then would this help the management of that?
Move more than, yeah, I mean, it's going to help you. It helps. This is the way it looks to you. So we can help house arrest. We can help a couple different things. Even with the Getting Out app, I mean, that would be a vendor, right? That's a vendor who sold that particular AI system. And we try to work with them too. We try to give them the governance, the AI governance as well, because the vendors in themselves, for example, they can't say that their system's 100% flawless, because that's bias for them to say that. They have to have somebody who's a third party actually come in and look at even though we're not critiquing their technology, we still could come give them the governance layer portion of it and say, well, look, when we ran our systems or our software pieces on it, it came back and it was, 99% this, or we noticed patterns here where maybe it was, going in one direction and it probably needs to go in another direction, along those. But yeah, it's a whole system, like I said, man, where we're just not capturing the
Okay.
one side of things. So yeah, so you could apply it to a lot of different scenarios also.
Okay, well, maybe we can talk about that then as we in Montana, it's July, you might as well say. I've got 6 months to prep up for the start of the legislative session coming 1 January. We can talk about it more, off camera.
I know, man. I've been trying to. I got to make a meeting with
I
you
know.
anyway. It's been like months. I got to make a meeting with you, but I will, man. I'll make sure.
All right, we had
Right, Professor.
Mary Ann and General Parker.
Okay.
Mary Ann, I see your.
I'll just go real quick. One of the interesting things that I found about what Dr. Fleming is doing, it's putting her into the conversations with really the country's leading technology companies. So we're getting a glimpse into what is being built, what is being considered. There are billions of dollars of new platform going into a antiquated criminal justice system that it was built in the 50s and 60s. So there's literally billions of dollars of new technology. So what I find interesting about what she's doing is this is giving us a chance to be behind and in some of the discussions where things are being built with how the governance could be applied to the technology. So there's a whole layer that we would have never seen, never have learned about. We're learning every day what are the different ways that AI is being implemented. And back, Judith, to your original question, how you get different answers. Well, those are the general, like Chat GPTs, those are the wide ones. However, these are being built in these, in the justice system on very specific learning language models that are very, very, very specific. So they're not like searching just in general, like 5 different AIs that we all might be using, in our work. So, but getting a chance to actually dig deep and be in the conversation, I think in itself is a really important area that we would have never been aware of had Dr. Fleming not begun the work that she did.
Yeah, some of them were very, interesting. Like I said, I would talk with Mary Ann about
They're all
one organization, one company, and the guy he created, he also said the same thing. I mean, like I said, we're trying to do the governance portion. This guy's trying to do the AI technology, and he was having a hard time selling the technology into some of these older facilities. But it was like his stuff was far more advanced, where it was like it was captured every single thing that was going on in that cell. I mean, it could tell if there was fights, and just because, like I said, of the breathing and these other kind of apparatuses and those type of things. But a lot of them still, they don't want that system in there, because every time they hear documentation from us, or every time they hear accountability from the software person, it throws them, in the direction like, no, we don't want that, because we may be exposed for doing something wrong. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. General Parker?
Thank you, Judith. How you doing, Stephanie?
I'm good, Jennifer. How have you been? It's good to see you.
Well, for an old ugly man, I can't complain. See, I'm in law school and I was interning for an organization, and I was in the legal aid clinic, and we had a guy come through that was on an ankle monitor, and they violated him. And they were supposed to have taken the ankle monitor off anyway, but they left it on for several months. And anyway, they tried to claim that he was non-compliant. And my boss was kind of believing that he was non-compliant because the machine was saying that they were reading that he was drunk and stuff. And when I spoke with an expert, he said, well, they just giving you just periodic readings. I said you had to get a continual reading. He said, because look at right here, it says he was a 1.0, And then I think it was like 2 hours later, he was zero. He said nobody can go from being totally drunk to zero in 2 hours. So what you're saying, it was somebody who made the a human who
Yeah,
made the decision to go ahead and take that
exactly.
reading and just say he was okay.
Exactly right. That was the human. So they got the alerts coming in and they're seeing the alerts, but it was whoever that human was or whoever that supervision officer was, they
Uh-huh.
ultimately were the ones that made that decision to violate him. And that's
Oh, okay.
yeah. Yeah. And see that's where that breakdown happens because you say, well, you're right. I mean, you don't go from sober to completely drunk in a short period of time. I mean, there's a whole gradual buildup of it. And there's
Right.
probably other factors. I mean, they probably had medical issues going on, to be honest. You
And
know,
that was another thing too. So so they're sending a lot of people back
yes,
bogusly then, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thanks.
It's,
I'm glad to know that. I appreciate you.
and it's you're welcome, gentlemen. You know, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I spoke with a gentleman just not that long ago, and he came from one because there's only a few organizations or companies that do the ankle monitoring, and this is one of the larger. He left there and he opened his own company. And the reason he ended up leaving was he said that he was just so tired of, you know, this big company was constantly sued back and forth because of something like this, right? Where they say, well,
Right.
look, the man had a medical problem, but you're saying he's drunk. And they first of all, the family goes and what they try to do is they file a lawsuit against the supervision officer. Supervision officer points the finger and says, well, no, it was your ankle monitor that said that. You know, and there's a whole that's why they need us. That's why they need us to go in and do the governance portion to kind of, you know, cover it from one direction or the other. But yes, that
Okay.
happens every day, Joe, every day, especially in the
Okay.
supervision. Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Make sure I got all your information because we might get you a contract out here.
Yeah, we need more. Like I said, the more we spread, I think the better is for us. But I have you, so I'm going to talk with you soon.
All right. Thanks.
That
Thank
is
you.
such an eye opener, and especially that, as General Parker mentioned, that happens often. The reason why, these violations occur is because of that mismanagement of results. And if we don't dig deep, then we are putting people at unnecessary risk, really. And
Yes.
those rates, those statistics go up, and it hinders everybody, but not necessarily because there were, the results were effectively reviewed, or as you mentioned, the quality assurance that needs to be in place for these to be effective. There's one more question, and I think we can wrap it up with this one. And it says, P2P, you're deeply involved in systemic change for higher education, which, yes, we've seen the results of that. What do you see the biggest opportunity for Unlock Higher Education Coalition to move the needle on equitable access over the next few years? So what do you think about Unlock Higher Education when it comes to that?
And you guys are doing a great job now. I mean, what else are you going to expand? I mean, okay, so biggest opportunity, I think, moving this forward and looking at it as far as, accessing it. I think, being able to really just, even if, like I said, let's use what we talked about today. I mean, how are we able to get some more of these students into these universities and whatnot without having that red tape that comes along? Like I said, for example, where someone's making the decision and saying, okay, they were incarcerated people, or this was an incarcerated person, and we're going to just go ahead and set them aside because we have 100 other applications here. Maybe that person should have a choice as opposed to this other one before, and I think that's a big factor there too as well. That is. We kind of looked at it too, and I talked with Marianne about this also, and I said, it's like I said, it doesn't just fall in that justice system. I mean, we're even trying to work with second chance employment to try to assist with that, because I think that's another huge factor. There's no one out there right now that's actually looking at the human element of why, they're picking this person over this one yet. But the JDO framework will go and fit that criteria. So we just recently, it was just like 2 weeks ago, right before I got sick, we published another document on that for second chance employment as well. Should share that with everybody so you could look at it and actually see that, because it is very significant.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to, be get a hold of that information, because many of us come with, those barriers to reentry, especially incorporating back into the workforce. And we quite often end up either unemployed or underemployed.
Yes.
And especially with, extensive experience in our background and all that. And so I want to, it's difficult to be positioned and viewed without the stigma of what a background brings. And so it would be great to see where those decisions are being made and how we can tackle really and pinpoint to give us better access for employment opportunities and educational opportunities, because it's the same concept, the same way, the same stigma, and those barriers are being implemented in the same way for both roadmaps. So definitely, if you can forward that to us, and I'll share it with the community if they're interested as well. Dr. Fleming, it was phenomenal having you, and I can't, get enough of really understanding this concept and this creation that you have been able to achieve. And I really, really hope that people take it serious and implement it into work, because this is, again, a more accurate and game changer when it comes to the results and the likelihood of people in this not only in reentry, but also in other spaces of their lives. So I think this is a phenomenal way to really look at the human factors that AI cannot ever duplicate.
Thank you, Judith. And I went ahead, I put the link in there for that. This workforce reentry and employment, second chance employment. But there's, like I said, there's a lot more links. Now I'll make sure that you guys have those if you'd like to look at them further.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for staying over a couple of minutes. Again, this was a conversation that we couldn't close out, because it was so important to have this understanding, and to look forward to how this is going to really change the landscape of our reentry journey. So thank you for taking the time to really develop something like this, so important and so needed.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.